height.
You look like a giraffe.
Keep.
Hey.
The deadlift workout is by far the best exercise for building upper back thickness and broadening your V-taper. It also improves explosive strength, improves athletic performance, and engages a lot of muscles that make up your posterior chain. Now, although the deadlift builds a strong injury-resistant back, it's very important to make sure that you perform the exercise correctly, otherwise you risk injuring your lower back because of the amount of heavy weight you can lift, since this is a compound exercise. If you have not been coached before on how to properly execute the exercise and are just merely lifting the weight off the floor, then chances are there are some mistakes you might be doing without knowing that could potentially injure you. Well, in this video, we'll point out all these common mistakes that people make and how to avoid them. The first mistake that's so common when performing the deadlift is rounding your back when lifting the weight. This is one of the most problematic mistakes that definitely results in severe injuries onto your back. When you are rounding your back while lifting the weight, you are letting the weight pull you instead of you pulling the weight up, and have a tendency to herniate discs due to the compression of the front side of the spine. In order to avoid this, you want to retract your shoulders while keeping your head back straight and chest out the entire time, ensuring that your hips, back, and head are in line. Now, another tip when you're struggling with this, and keeping in mind that the weight is not too heavy, is that instead of just thinking about lifting the weight off the floor, think about driving your feet, more like a standing leg press. So essentially, you want to initiate the movement from the floor to your knees with a push of your legs into the ground. Do this similar to how you would push your feet during the leg press. Then at this point, complete the movement by driving your hips forward. Another way to avoid this mistake is to make sure that the bar is close enough to avoid you stretching out in attempts to reach it. Typically, you want the bar to be around the mid area of your feet. This will allow you to lift the bar in a parallel form. Another mistake is not maintaining a parallel path throughout the movement. When performing the deadlift, you want to make sure that you lift the weight in a straight line, performing about a 90-degree angle to the ground. One way to see this is by making sure that the bar is directly above where it was on the ground. If you start out with the weight a bit distance from your shins or feet, this will eventually round your back, which is not what you want. Instead, to ensure that you avoid this, approach the bar making sure it's around the center of your feet. Then lift the weight up while making sure that you keep the bar as close to your shins and hips as possible while retracting your shoulders. The aim here is to try and engage your lats before pulling. This will eventually avoid you jerking the movement when trying to lift the bar. Another mistake is hyperextending the spine. A lot of people tend to fall prey to this mistake, where at the top of the movement they tend to hyperextend the lower back, overextending their hips forward, and this causes a lot of tension on the lower back. Your ultimate goal is to squeeze your glutes at the top of the movement without leaning back. The next mistake is squatting the deadlift. This happens when the hips are positioned too low at the bottom of the movement in such a way that they are parallel to your knees and your back is in a slightly upright position. This puts all the weight of your body onto the side of the bar and repositions your center of gravity. This ultimately reduces your advantage and ability to lift the weight off the floor using your whole body, but instead you'll be forced to use your lower back, and this generally limits the amount of weight you can lift and increases the chances of injuring your lower back. In order to avoid all of this, make sure that while you're about to lift the weight, your hips are somewhere around the mid-level between your shoulder and knee height. keeping in mind that your chest is out and your back is straight, not too low or too high. What's important, like we mentioned earlier, is to make sure that the bar is not far from your shins, but keep it right under your scapula. Another mistake that people tend to make is jerking the weight off the floor. This happens when you try to loosely lift the weight off the ground in attempts to help boost the lift. The problem with this is that in the long run, you end up putting your shoulders at risk because of all the weight that pulls against them as you're rapidly trying to loosely lift the weight off the floor, especially with heavier weight. Another problem with this is that you end up putting your lower back under extensive tension, which will lead to discomfort during the exercise and even after. And since you are in a flexed state, you forfeit the necessary muscular tension that you need to lift the weight, and you end up lifting with a rounded back. In order to fix this, you want to first keep in mind that you need to generate tension before the lift. And to do this, you'll need to place your hands on the bar while keeping your chest out and retract your shoulders. Then continue with the lift. Well, that's it, guys. If you avoid these mistakes and use the right weight instead of going too heavy, then you're well on your way to building a strong posterior chain. If you want to learn more in depth on how to build a bigger back, then check out this video where we're going over all the exercises and techniques to help you build your back. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below, as this will help us greatly. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.